Hi, my name is Jody Perry, and I'm the President and CEO of the Richland Area Chamber and Economic Development. Today, I'm going to tell you about our Richland County COVID-19 nonprofit grants, which are open for application through Sunday, November 22nd. So how did we get here? Well, you may remember back in the spring when Congress passed something called the CARES Act, and that allocated money to state and local governments as well as businesses through the Paycheck Protection Program. The state of Ohio chose to give some of its CARES grant allocation to counties, cities, townships, and villages. In July, the Richland County Commissioners reached out to us to start a small business grant fund because they knew many small businesses were still struggling. We've now gone through 2 rounds of funding and are in the process of helping over 400 businesses with about $2 million in grants, with funds that have been contributed by Richland County, the cities of Mansfield, Shelby, and Ontario, and the villages of Plymouth, Lexington, and Belleville. On October 22nd, the Commissioners established a separate fund to assist 501c3 organizations, and currently we have $500,000 in funding provided by Richland County to award to this program. So what types of nonprofits are eligible? First, you must be a 501c3 nonprofit as recognized by the Internal Revenue Service. You must also be registered with the Ohio Secretary of State's office. Your nonprofit must have been in operation prior to February 28, 2020, and you will need to show proof of existence. The nonprofit must have $4 million or less in operating revenues for 2019. The nonprofit must be able to provide their employer identification number. Nonprofits must have 40 full-time equivalents or FTEs or less as employees. And we're defining that for the purposes of this grant as a full-time 40-hour employee counts as 1 FTE. A part-time employee, someone who works less than 40 hours, counts as a half FTE. And also, a 1099 contractor is looked at like an employee using the above definitions as FTEs. Nonprofits with between $100,000 and $4 million in 2019 operating revenues can apply for a maximum grant amount of $7,500. And nonprofits with less than $100,000 in 2019 operating revenues can apply for a maximum grant amount of $2,500. And the principal place of operation or headquarters for the nonprofit must be located here in Richland County. If located outside of the county, the organization must have a Richland County address and be providing services in Richland County in order to be considered. What types of nonprofits are disqualified from applying? Any nonprofit that is permanently closed and or not intending to reopen its business following the pandemic. Of course, we're not talking about temporary closures here, but a permanent closure. Any nonprofit that's in receivership or bankruptcy. Any for-profit business is not eligible in this round. Any other type of nonprofit other than a 501c3 is also not eligible. Any public, private, or charter schools, any colleges and universities, any hospitals, any government or public service entity, any levy-funded organization, or any other funders. None of those types of organizations are eligible at this time. There is one other eligibility requirement for nonprofits. You must choose to apply to one of 2 grant program funds that we have set up. So let's talk about the first one, which is the Nonprofit Relief Grant Program Fund, which focuses on funding organizations who work in basic or important needs. Now, we have 6 areas that we have set up and defined in this area. Let's talk about what those do. First would be nonprofits that work with food and clothing, providing groceries, meals, or other food and clothing services directly to Richland County residents. Second would be shelter, which would be organizations that provide housing assistance, including homeless prevention and service organizations, or other nonprofits that assist in temporary housing or housing support services. Third would be health, excluding hospitals. And these types of organizations would be providing medical, dental, and mental health care to Richland County residents. Fourth would be safe care / safety net services. And this one would be working with organizations who work with keeping children, elders, and special needs populations safe at home or in community settings. For example, non-school child care centers, elder care wellness services, before or after school programs, homeless shelters, mentoring, community and neighborhood development programs who are providing some basic needs to their neighborhoods, social service programs to refugees and immigrants, educational programs that enhances one's ability to stay employed or to care for their children or family, and stray pet care or pet adoption services. Fifth, the area of workforce development. Organizations that work and have programs designed to assist residents with acquiring and maintaining employment, considering the economic impact created by the COVID-19 pandemic. And lastly, in the area of entrepreneurship, this would be organizations with programs designed to assist residents with starting a business or that provide support services to local entrepreneurs, considering the economic impact created by the COVID-19 pandemic. If you choose to apply under this grant, your organization must work primarily in one or more of these areas. The other fund program that we have is the Richland County Arts, Culture, and Attractions Grant Program. In order to be considered here, you must be an arts, culture, and/or attraction organization and have an articulated mission that is dedicated to arts, culture, and/or serving as a local attraction. For the purposes of this grant, arts and culture will be defined as creating, preserving, and/or exhibiting visual, multidisciplinary, literary, and performing arts, public art, history, and humanities, or be considered a cultural asset unique to the Richland County community. Individual artists are not eligible. An attraction will be considered a nonprofit organization that serves as a key asset that serves a local audience and/or draws visitors into Richland County. And once again, in order to be eligible, your nonprofit must fit into either the Relief Grant Program that we talked about previously or this Arts, Culture, and Attractions program. So now let's talk about how you can use the grant funds. Most importantly, it can be used for operating expenses, which should make many nonprofits happy. So unless there's exceptions that are noted below, expenses of the nonprofit that are related to the interruption caused by required closures or because your nonprofit is facing uncertainty to pay because of the pandemic, and that would be considered deductible as ordinary and necessary business expenses by the IRS, may be paid for with grant funds. Some of the most common things that we are seeing would be mortgage payments for your nonprofit's principal place of business or other business location in Richland County. Of course, if it's located in a home-based nonprofit, that would not be eligible. Rent payments for your nonprofit's principal place of business. Then the same exclusion applies there if it's located in a primary residence. Utility payments such as electric, gas, sewer, water, and trash removal, all of those would be eligible for reimbursement under this program. Health, property and casualty, and liability insurance payments would be considered eligible. Vehicle and equipment lease or rental payments for vehicles and equipment that were leased on or prior to March 15th, 2020. The most popular one is certainly salaries and wages of all employees employed by the nonprofit. There might be other costs related to the interruption or maybe the reopening. Maybe you had to retrofit some of your facilities. You can claim those costs on your grant. Your expenses must be incurred and paid on between March 15th and December 30th, 2020. One important thing to note is if you received the Paycheck Protection Program or other federal funds, you may not claim the same thing for this program as you did for that because they are the same funding source. Now, let's say you claimed payroll for the Paycheck Protection Program back in April, May, and June. Well, you can claim payroll for October, November, and December under our program. You may also claim something that you have paid in the past. In fact, I would recommend that you do that because you're going to have all the backup documentation that you need already. So again, expenses must be incurred and paid by March 15th through December 30th, 2020. So what do you need to know to apply? Well, to start, you're going to visit our website, www.richlandareachamber.com. Under the Initiatives tab, you'll see the Nonprofit Grant Program. At the top of that page, there's an Apply Here for the Grant tab. The applications are open now through 11:59 p.m. on Sunday, November 22nd, 2020. And please note the application must be submitted in full by 11:59 p.m. The program may allow you to keep it open longer than that, but it is date stamped, so if anything comes in after that time, it will be disqualified. You should expect to spend about 20 minutes on the application once you've gathered all the materials. The first page of the application, if you click into it, will give you an overview of the information that you need. We recommend that you gather some of these numbers before you start to fill out the application. Some of the core numbers you'll need include your annual operating revenues and expenses for all of 2019, your annual payroll expense for 2019. We'll also ask you for your year-to-date operating revenues and expenses for 2020. We'll ask you your estimated lost revenues due to COVID-19 through October 15th, 2020, as well as an estimated increased business expense due to COVID-19 through October 2020. It's important to note you must give us a number in order to qualify, showing either lost revenues or increased business expenses. If your nonprofit has not had either, then you do not qualify for the program. We encourage you to think through things that you might have normally done during this year and calculate that when you're looking at your lost revenues. The number of employees, we will ask you about that at 2 points in time. The first is as of March 15th, and the other is as of October 15th, 2020. There's some other information, things that you'll need to know, but the rest of it, for the most part, should be things that you're able to answer off the top of your head. So now let's talk about some best practice suggestions that we've seen through our small business rounds. First, take your time and be sure to answer all questions completely. We have to rely on what you tell us to qualify and score your application. Of course, you must be truthful in your responses, and you will certify that with submission of the application. At the end of the application, there's a series of yes/no questions. Make sure you slow down and read each one fully before you respond. If you don't understand something, please just ask. Sometimes answer to a question in this area might disqualify you from the grant. So again, I highly recommend slowing down and reading those fully. I also highly recommend reviewing your application before you submit it. Double check that you entered your numbers correctly. Double check that you picked the right fund. Double check all of those things on the application before you submit it. If you find that you did make a mistake on the grant application, please email us at grants@richlandareachamber.com as soon as you can. Explain the mistake and we will look into it for you. Please be patient and do not wait until the last minute to reach out about a change. The time of completion only factors into the review and decision-making process in the event that we have a tied score and are to the end of the grant dollars. A nonprofit who applied earlier would have a slight edge in that scenario. I would say earlier is better than later to apply, but you don't have to rush to complete to get it in first. And finally, we ask you for several financial numbers throughout the application. Please don't use decimal points, just round up to the nearest dollar. So now let's talk about how your application is scored. Just like we did with the Small Business Grant Program, we have put together an objective scoring process that is developed based on the data that you put into the application. So again, it's really important you get those answers correct. The methodology has been reviewed and overseen by our Grant Advisory Committee, and the scoring drives the funding allocation until the money is gone. In other words, we're not overriding it. It comes down to how your application scores based on the criteria that we have set up. So now let's talk about those 4 types of criteria. First, we'll look at your nonprofit profile, which includes the length of time your nonprofit has been open, as well as the years of experience of your executive director. This gives us a chance to understand your depth of history and your experience to weather the storm. We'll also look at your nonprofit financial impact. What has been the impact of COVID-19 on your nonprofit from a financial perspective? We're going to look at how much you're working to try to bring in new dollars by asking you questions about other things that you might have applied for. We also will look at your nonprofit employment impact. How many people do you employ here in Richland County? And lastly, we'll look at your sector and community economic impact. Where is your nonprofit located? Is it in a Jobs Ohio designated distressed zip code? And is your industry sector particularly vulnerable to COVID-19? And that's based on a study that Brookings did earlier this year. So what happens after you apply? Your application will be reviewed for eligibility and scored upon the award criteria we just talked about. We're aiming to announce the awards on November 30th, 2020. If selected for an award, you'll be contacted to provide some final documentation. Some things that we'll ask for. There's a grant agreement we'll ask you to fill out and sign with the Chamber, saying that you understand the terms and conditions and promise to spend the money as you laid out in your application. We'll need a copy of your W-9, a copy of your most recent 990 tax return, and a copy of your 501c3 IRS letter of determination. Once those are verified and your documents are received, then we'll issue a check for the grant rather. We'll need verification of the nonprofit expenses that you used it on by December 30th, 2020. And these are receipts or other proofs of how the money was spent. And again, we highly recommend that you use it for something you've already paid for, that you claim that, so that you have your eligibility expenses all ready to turn in very quickly. And please note, because this is funded by public funds, a final list of grant recipients will be publicly announced at the conclusion of the program. So that's it. You now know about our Richland County COVID-19 nonprofit grant program. If you still have questions, please feel free to reach out to the Chamber staff. You can reach us at grants@richlandareachamber.com or via phone Monday through Friday from 9 to 4 p.m. at 419-522-3211. When you're ready to apply, just visit our website to get started, www.richlandareachamber.com. Once again, we want to thank our Richland County Commissioners for partnering with us to put together this nonprofit grant program. Thanks to our grant advisory team who has helped us set the program up, and to everyone else who's contributed. I hope that you found this information helpful, and good luck.